Welcome, whatsoever, more or less. My name is Jason, and today I wanted to go ahead and share where my thoughts are going with the whole Iran situation. Being somebody who studies the Constitution and the Scriptures a lot, and has a dad in law enforcement too. I think that's relevant to the topic that we're going to cover here today. So, first, I want to cover it from the perspective of the Constitution. Actually, prior to that, I want to cover it from the perspective of a quote, something that Elder Gilbert recently said. In one of his interviews, someone was asking him, about people being stubborn in their stances or something like that. I can't remember what the question was, but he does a quick kind of quote from paraphrase of C.S. Lewis from the Screw Tape Letters, I guess is what it's called. And he says, the devil was talking to one of his servants on earth who was saying, well, I've got some people joining the Patriot Party and some people joining the Charity Party, or whatever the other party was called. And the Patriot Party is really good at following the rules, and the Charity Party, though, seems really sincere in a lot of what they want, right? And the devil says to his representative on earth, don't you get it? It doesn't matter which party they join, as long as they join a party and put the party platform above what they're supposed to be doing, above God's rules that he gave them. That's all that matters. Okay, and God's rules that he gave us in this day and age. And so that's where I'm going to stop right now. So with the quote portion, end quote, as they say in the General Conference. The rules that God has given us for this generation is whatsoever is more or less than the Constitution calls for or permits comes of evil. And so a lot of times it might seem like, okay, the libertarians are the ultimate constitutionalists, or the Republicans are the ultimate constitutionalists, and the Democrats are the ultimate maybe Christians, or I don't know, the carrying the ultimate charitable. All that stuff is just, let's leave it out of it. Let's look at the Constitution, because whatsoever more or less than the Constitution permits or calls for comes of evil. Then let's look at some law enforcement principles that are relevant to the topic, and you'll see why. And then let's look at some scriptural topics that I think are also relevant to the topic. So number one, if all you ever quote is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11, I believe it is, that's the one where the Congress shall have the power to declare war, you're skipping Clause 10, the clause before it, which says they shall have the power to define and punish crimes against the laws of nations, or offenses against the laws of nations. However you want to say it, define and punish. Okay, now anything that's in Article 1, Section 8, or even the conditional powers that are granted in Article 1, Section 9, all those are exercised then through the Article 1, Section 7, Clause 2 process, right? So these are actual laws that are passed. And then the president, once a law is passed, he has what's called the Take Care Clause. Now, Article 6, Clause 2 gives us a hierarchy of things that he should be taking care of. Number one, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Then laws that are pursuant to it, in other words, follow what the Constitution allows and calls for. And then next is the treaties, right? Which exercise no more than what treaties would have been understood to be allowed to exercise at the time the Constitution gained legal force, or what was the understood meaning of the word treaty at that time. Madison was concerned that one day in the future they would try to invent new meanings of the word treaties or other terms so that they could exercise more powers. And fortunately, I think there's enough checks and balances, honestly, with Article 1, Section 7, Clause 1, and what have you, that that will always be put in check forever. But we don't sometimes. Sometimes we let the Constitution get stretched. Anyhow, I got distracted here. So Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 says declare war. Now, first off, Madison said when they were at Philadelphia framing the Constitution, they originally worded in the word make war. Congress shall have the power to make war. And Madison said, nah, you got to change that to declare, because why are we putting in a single unitary chief executive if he literally has zero immediate emergency response power, right? So, which completely makes sense. You have to have immediate emergency response power in a single unitary chief executive. But then there has to be a point where it's ceased being an emergency, and then there's constitutional rules for when it's ceased being an emergency. So something such as, then prior to that, once again, you've got the define and punish clause against law of offenses against laws of nations, which is in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 10. And that's a plenary power. In other words, they don't have to double check with any other countries. They don't have to double check with the judicial branch. They don't have to double check with anybody. They simply define and punish what's an offense. Well, so Congress has passed, through that power, laws specifically dealing with Iran, and then laws specifically dealing with terrorism, nuclear proliferation, and laws dealing with threats against us. And prior to that ever being passed, though, the president was understood to have a certain amount of just power to deal with stopping an emergency. Right from the start, you've got Adams dealing with stuff. You've got Jefferson dealing with stuff in those early days. And they didn't wait for Congress if there was an emergency. They would go to Congress afterwards. But, too, you got to remember, they were very cautious in those days. And when you look at the plain text of the Constitution, so the tradition of the founders is useful, but you have to at some point look at the plain text, define and punish offenses against the laws of nations. Laws have been passed. Iran had a very offensive posture towards the United States. We took out their nuclear weapons. They were determined to get nuclear weapons again. Okay, so that's where I am so far with that. I'm not just Mr. Pro-Trump or anything like that, but I'm starting to get kind of irritated at libertarians that are constantly quoting Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 without looking at first off, the transition from the term declare, or from the term make war to declare war, which is two separate ways of saying things, and then the Article 1, Section 8, Clause 10. So then let's look at the principle then. So if you've got a self-defense right in the United States and the ability to kind of set laws, hey, you nations, you're not allowed to do this to us. You're not allowed to threaten us this way. You're not allowed to point those things at us, what have you. We're allowed to pass laws saying that. Don't do it. Now, let's look at it from a law enforcement perspective. We have to at this point. So people always want that cop to be the one who just shoots out the knee, shoots the gun out of the hand of the guy, just like in the movies, right? Waits until the guy takes the first shot, right, to make sure it's a fair fight or something like that, right? That's the silliest. If you're the son of a cop, that's not what you want your dad doing on his job. If the gun's pointed at him, if somebody's reaching for their gun and drawing it, if they're within a certain reasonable distance, that they're reasonably lethal, if there's other people that are threatened by them, surrounding them, if they've got a knife and they're within 7 yards, I think is what it is. Because you ever tried drawing your gun and popping off rounds as fast as you can while somebody charges at you from 7 yards away as fast as they can? Try it sometime, okay? You don't want to play around with those, how far can I push it before I've let it go too far and now I'm in deep, now I'm getting shot because I tried to be the nice cop, okay? So from what I can tell, Iran was not intending to back off. They were pretending to negotiate, playing games with us. And so if the accounts are honest, and look, I don't follow the news extensively. I've already said that. I'm taking a break from too much news to build up my foundation, just like the Salt Lake Temple. Okay? The Salt Lake Temple had to be put out of commission temporarily. I'm still following the news enough. But without that constitutional foundation, I feel like I'm not qualified to do what the Lord has called me to do. And so I might as well leave the news as a secondary priority until I really have that Constitution solid, right? So as I understand it, that's what Iran was in. They were involved in building up their powers against everybody again, and they still hated us. It was still death to America. They still hated Israel. It was still death to Israel. And we've got a lot of close connections with Israel. We got a lot of our citizens who like to go over there. So anytime Israel's threatened, our people are threatened, period. That's just all there is to it. And so if we're friends with them, it's like our kids are always over there playing at their house, basically, right? And you've got the neighbor of our friend's house, kid's friend's house way over there. Doesn't matter if it's like a significant distance. If their neighbors are threatening, you're going to start saying, hey, dude, no, stop, right? You don't wait for the gun to get drawn again. You don't wait for it to get reloaded again. You don't wait for them to go and grab another gun out of the car and start pointing it at you. At that point, they're belligerent. They're a threat. You have to stop it. I think that's solid law enforcement perspective. But you guys look it up when lethal force is justifiable. Look it up for yourselves. Now, coming to scriptural perspective here. First, this is controversial, and I'm sure of it, but I'll point out the Zeniff thing again. Zeniff was right at the time that King Benjamin had chased the Lamanites, who had been, the Nephites had landed in a land of first inheritance. The Lamanites were getting belligerent, so the Nephites went to the land of Nephi. The Lamanites then found the land of Nephi, so the Nephites moved on to Zarahemla, and that's where they lived to get away from the Lamanites again. Then the Lamanites began to encroach on Zarahemla. King Benjamin chased them out. A group of people is sent with Zeniff not being in charge, and the commander says, we're here to run the Lamanites out of the land of Nephi. But Zeniff's like, no, I want to be buddies with them. I want to be friends with them. I want to be that guy who just shoots out their kneecap, right? Something like that. I might be controversial on this, but maybe look at it this way, just please. Well, so he starts a war then with all those fellow soldiers that were there spying on the land of Nephi, kills off half of his own army, goes back, gets another army, comes back. Now he's the leader of the army, makes a pact with the king of the Lamanites, who really had intention just to use the Nephites for their production. And in the end, they have to kill a bunch of Lamanites anyhow, by the time it gets to King Noah's generation, right? So what was the value in that? What happened? Same amount of deaths anyhow, maybe even more, right? So that's always been a story that's kind of bugged me. He could have just done what, I'm guessing that first commander was possibly exhorted by King Benjamin, hey, why don't you go check that out? It's a reasonable guess, okay? But let's go to another scriptural example. Let's go to Alma and Amulek, okay? So, and I thought about Cuba versus now, first off, too, I should point out, there are times when Captain Moroni and his armies in the war chapters, they go and they don't just deal with stopping the attack on their own area from the enemy, right? The Amulonites or whoever that group was that was egging on the Lamanites. But they also then go and protect neighbors and other allies. So this is a common thing. When you've got a belligerent going around attacking yourselves plus others, you go and you help your others too, right? But one more here I think that's very relevant is the story of Amulek and Alma when they're preaching to the people. And I'm going to relate this to Cuba versus Iran. So a while back we saw Cuba, the people were protesting, wanting their freedom, everything like that. And I thought, Biden was president, maybe they'll do something to go help them out. And they weren't doing anything to help them out. As a matter of fact, they weren't letting Cubans cross the border, right? Letting everybody else except for the Cubans who are freedom lovers, right? But so it was irritating. But here's the point, is the Cuban government never started killing their own people and slaying them. They just started arresting them and suppressing them. In Iran, we recently had those kind of protests. And the Iranian regime, from everything I can tell, they started just killing a bunch of their own people, any protesters, things like that, thousands of people. So there's plenty of people attesting to that. And I'm thinking of Alma and Amulek when they're sitting there. They're tied up. They're in prison. And these people of... Oh, shoot. I don't think it was Zarahemla at that point. There was a different community, I think, at that point. They're rejecting the gospel. They're mad at anybody who's a believer who refuses to deny Christ. And they're taking him and throwing him into a pit to burn him, and they're burning books. And Amulek says, can't we stop this? Can't we stop this? And Alma says, no, the Spirit constraineth me not to. I have to allow this to keep happening so that there may be a just judgment when these people get to the other side who committed these crimes. So they wait. Finally, the Lamanites come spit on their, or not the Lamanites, it's, I can't remember which people. They come and spit on their faces. And at that point, they've done enough. And Alma basically calls on the Lord. And boom, the walls fall down of the prisons, stuff like that. I haven't read this chapters in a while, so I need to read them again. But so this is all off the top of my head, but I think I'm saying this right. I didn't review it for the sake of this video. I'm out here just making sure my goats are enjoying eating. But the point is, at that point, they had earned their consequence that they got. And I can't help but notice the difference between Cuba and Iran. Cuba suppressed their people. They didn't kill them. Iran killed their people. So they were threatening the place where our kids like to go play. They were threatening us. They were belligerent. They were reloading the weapon. The Constitution gives the president the take care clause. Laws had been passed through the Article 7, Section Article 1, Section 7, Clause 2 process. The exercising powers that are granted in Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 10, really Clause 10. Clause 11 only reserves to Congress the power to declare war. But this can be easily classified as a law enforcement action as long as it doesn't go on forever like the Vietnam War or something like that. That's at that point, I don't think you can reasonably call that a law enforcement action. I think you have to call that a declared war. But that's my thoughts right now. Again, I'm developing my foundation a lot of this stuff right now. So you guys are here with me for the journey. I've been reading the Constitution every day for the past couple of years. And prior to that, working on it, trying to understand it, trying to get it into my brain. And for some reason, it just finally started clicking. But I think I'm about done with this whole accusation of every time the president takes any military action anywhere, that boom, it's an unconstitutional war. Congress has the power to declare war. I'm finding that very disingenuous by the people who claim to be the experts on the Constitution, because there is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 10, and there is that clarification that it's the power to declare a war, not the power to make war. So there has to be a power for the president to just do a certain amount of things, and that's all there is to it. And I think that in this case, to have been like Zenith and just tried to make a deal with him, unwise. And to have just tried to shoot for the knee, unwise. I think they had really earned. They had been like those people who were persecuting Alma and Ami, like all the believers. They earned it. I really. That's where my instincts are going right now. This isn't me being political. I'm not rah Trump. I'm not rah Democrats, rah libertarians, rah Republicans. None of that stuff. I'm just saying. Can we apply what the Constitution actually says? What the scriptures actually, the verbs. Look at all the verbs. Look at all the nouns. Look at all the adjectives, all the adverbs, all that kind of stuff. Be able to cross-reference it. And I think it's probably right this time. I don't know, though. I don't know. I mean, we've seen so many other disasters over there. So it's kind of a tough call. I did see a nice, thoughtful one covered by Latter-day Saints with the Paul brothers yesterday. I kind of heard it while I was doing a lot of stuff, so I didn't thoroughly hear it, but it seemed like it was a pretty good one too. You might go there for some perspective. So, all right, thanks for listening, you guys. See you.